All alien elite warriors failed the royal test. Then she jokingly picked and pinched a human janitor. Queen Leora of Nexus Prime sat on her ornate throne, her smooth blue skin practically glowing with irritation under the grand chamber's ambient light. Her long silvery hair cascaded down her shoulders like liquid mercury, and her azure eyes, capable of piercing the souls of her subjects, now glazed over with boredom. For the 6th consecutive hour, she'd been watching elite warriors fail her royal test. "Next," she called out, her melodious voice tinged with undisguised weariness. The massive doors swung open, and another hulking figure entered. Like his predecessors, he wore the traditional dark gray armor of Nexus Prime's elite warriors, the Vanguard. The armor plates shifted and adjusted with each movement, a technological marvel that had protected the royal family for centuries. "Your Majesty," the warrior announced, dropping to one knee, "I am Krell, son of Morath, champion of the Eastern Quadrant. I have slain the beasts of the Void Wastes and survived the trials of Yes, Leora interrupted, waving her slender hand dismissively. "Everyone has impressive credentials. That's why you're here. Begin the test." The chamber reconfigured itself. Floor panels slid away, revealing a complex obstacle course filled with deadly traps, energy barriers, and combat drones. The test was simple in concept. Reach the sacred relic at the far end within the time limit. Krell charged forward with impressive speed, his armor's boosters propelling him over the first set of obstacles. He dodged energy beams, deflected projectiles with his gauntlets, and smashed through physical barriers with brute force. "He's doing well," observed High Counselor Thrain from beside the throne. "They all do well at the beginning," Leora replied, examining her perfectly manicured nails. Sure enough, when Krell reached the 3rd section, the neural disruptors, his movements became erratic. He staggered, his armor systems faltering under the invisible assault. When the combat drones descended, he was too disoriented to respond effectively. A direct hit to his chest plate sent him sprawling backward. "Test failed," announced the automated system. Leora sighed deeply. "Another disappointment. The Vanguard isn't what it used to be." "Your Majesty," Thrain began cautiously, "perhaps the test is too difficult. No one has passed it in 3 generations." "My great-grandmother passed it," Leora snapped. "Are you suggesting our warriors have grown weaker since then?" "No, Your Majesty, but—" "Next." But there was no next. Krell had been the final candidate of the day. The chamber fell into an uncomfortable silence as medical drones attended to the fallen warrior. It was during this lull that Leora noticed movement in her peripheral vision. A human male was quietly mopping the floor in a far corner of the chamber, seemingly trying to remain invisible. Unlike the towering Nexus Prime natives, he stood only about 6 feet tall, but his frame was impressively muscular. His worn work clothes and heavy apron were stained with various cleaning solutions, and thick gloves protected his hands. Something about his quiet diligence irritated Leora even further. Here she was, surrounded by the supposed elite of her species, and none could complete a simple test. Yet this human, a member of a species known throughout the galaxy for their bizarre mix of fragility and unexpected resilience, simply went about his work without complaint. A mischievous idea formed in her mind. "You there?" she called out, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Human." The janitor froze, then slowly turned to face her, his eyes wide with surprise. "Me, Your Majesty?" "Yes, you," Leora said, a playful smirk forming on her blue lips. She rose from her throne and glided down the steps toward him. The entire court watched in stunned silence. The human straightened up, setting his mop aside. Up close, Leora could see he was actually quite handsome by human standards. Strong jawline, intelligent green eyes, and dark hair cut short in the utilitarian style favored by service workers. "What's your name?" she asked, circling him like a predator. "Well, Jack Harper, Your Majesty," he replied, his voice steady despite his obvious confusion. "Well, Jack Harper," she said, stopping directly in front of him. "I've watched elite warriors fail my test all day long." She reached out and playfully pinched his shoulder. "Perhaps you'd like to try?" A collective gasp rose from the court officials. High Counselor Thrain stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. The royal test is reserved for those I deem worthy of attempting it," Leora finished for him, her eyes never leaving Jack's face. "And right now, I'm curious to see what this human can do." Jack shook his head. "Your Majesty, this is madness. I'm just a janitor. I have no combat training, no." "Are you refusing a direct request from your queen?" Leora asked, her voice dangerously soft. Jack swallowed hard. "No, Your Majesty." "Excellent!" Leora clapped her hands together and returned to her throne. "Begin the test." The chamber fell into stunned silence as Jack stepped onto the testing ground. He removed his work gloves and apron, setting them aside with careful precision that betrayed his nervousness. "This is ridiculous," muttered one of the court officials. "A human janitor attempting the royal test? It's an insult to our traditions." Queen Leora shot the official a withering glance. "Perhaps our traditions could use a little shaking up." Jack surveyed the obstacle course before him. Unlike the warriors who had preceded him, he didn't charge in immediately. Instead, he studied the layout, his green eyes narrowing as he assessed each section. "Is he going to stand there all day?" someone whispered. "Begin!" Leora commanded, leaning forward with unexpected interest. Jack took a deep breath and started moving. His approach was nothing like the Vanguard warriors, where they had relied on brute force and technological enhancements. He moved with a fluid economy of motion that seemed almost choreographed. In the first section, rather than powering through obstacles, he slipped between them. When faced with a wall too high to climb, he didn't attempt to scale it directly. Instead, he used adjacent structures as leverage points, creating his own path. "Fascinating," Leora murmured, her azure eyes tracking his every movement. The second section featured automated weapon systems. Without armor, Jack should have been at a severe disadvantage, yet he seemed to anticipate the firing patterns, moving just before each weapon discharge. It wasn't superhuman speed, it was calculation. "He's reading the system," High Counselor Thrain observed with reluctant admiration. "See how he watches the targeting lights? He's using our own technology's limitations against it." When Jack reached the third section, the neural disruptors that had felled Krell, and something unexpected happened. He slowed down but didn't stagger like the others. His movements became more deliberate, his face contorted in concentration, but he kept advancing. "Impossible," gasped an official. "The disruptors are calibrated for all known sentient neural patterns." "Except human ones, apparently," Leora replied, unable to hide her growing fascination. As Jack progressed further than any candidate that day, the court's whispers grew louder. Leora found herself gripping the armrests of her throne, her heart beating faster with each obstacle he cleared. When the combat drones descended, Jack didn't try to fight them directly. Instead, he maneuvered them into positions where they interfered with each other. One drone actually fired upon another, causing a cascade of malfunctions. "He's going to reach the relic," Thrain said, his voice tight with disbelief. Indeed, Jack was approaching the final platform where the sacred object rested. The entire court was on their feet now, watching as this human janitor accomplished what elite warriors could not. "Stop the test!" came a commanding voice from the entrance. General Dravix, Supreme Commander of the Vanguard, strode into the chamber, his ceremonial armor gleaming. "This mockery has gone far enough." The test systems immediately shut down. Jack, mere steps from the relic, froze in place, uncertain what to do. "General," Leora acknowledged coldly, "you interrupt a royal proceeding." "With respect, Your Majesty," Dravix replied, bowing stiffly, "allowing a human servant to attempt, much less complete, the sacred test would undermine the very foundation of the Vanguard's authority. The political ramifications would be significant." Leora's eyes narrowed, but she recognized the truth in his words. The Vanguard maintained order throughout Nexus Prime. Humiliating them publicly wasn't wise, no matter how entertaining. "Very well," she conceded. "The test is concluded." Jack returned to the edge of the chamber, his expression carefully neutral despite having been denied his moment of triumph. As he retrieved his discarded work items, Leora descended from her throne once more. "You," she said, approaching him with newfound interest, "are full of surprises, Jack Harper." "Just doing what I was ordered to, Your Majesty," he replied, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Where did you learn to move like that? To analyze systems so quickly?" A flicker of something, caution perhaps, crossed his features. "You pick things up when you work in the background. People don't notice the janitor watching." "I'm noticing now," Leora said, stepping closer than protocol would normally allow. She could smell the faint scent of him, distinctly human, earthy and warm. Something primal stirred within her. I wonder what else you can do. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the power dynamic between queen and servant seemed to shift into something more balanced, more intimate. Many things, Your Majesty, Jack answered, a hint of challenge in his voice that sent an unexpected thrill through Leora's body, though most of them aren't suitable for demonstration in the royal court. Leora felt heat rise to her cheeks, turning her blue skin a deeper shade. Perhaps a private demonstration could be arranged? Is that an order, Your Majesty? Jack asked, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. Consider it a royal request, she replied, surprised by her own boldness. My chambers. Tonight, after the third bell. Without waiting for his response, she turned and glided back to her throne, aware of both Jack's eyes and General Dravik's suspicious glare following her every step. The royal palace of Nexus Prime transformed at night. The bustling corridors emptied, the harsh lighting dimmed to a soft glow, and the ever-present hum of activity faded to a whisper. Jack moved through this transformed landscape like a shadow, his footsteps silent from years of practice. He had changed from his work clothes into the simple but clean, off-duty attire provided to human staff. Dark pants and a fitted gray shirt that accentuated his muscular frame. As he approached the royal wing, his mind raced with questions about the wisdom of what he was doing. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, General Dravik stood before a bank of monitoring screens, his angular face illuminated by their glow. Follow him, he instructed the security officer beside him. I want to know exactly where he goes and what he does. Sir, the royal wing has privacy protocols. We can't override them, Dravik snapped. This human is not what he appears to be. No janitor moves like that. No human should be able to resist our neural disruptors. The officer hesitated. The Queen wouldn't approve of... The Queen is young and inexperienced, Dravik interrupted. It's our duty to protect her, even from her own indiscretions. On the monitor, they watched Jack approach the royal chambers. Queen Leora dismissed her attendants early, something she rarely did. Now she stood alone on her private balcony, gazing at the twin moons that hung low in Nexus Prime's night sky. She had changed from her formal regalia into a flowing gown of shimmering fabric that complemented her blue skin. A soft chime announced a visitor. Enter, she called, not turning from the view. The door slid open and Jack stepped inside. The royal chambers were vast, a series of interconnected rooms decorated with artifacts from across the galaxy. He paused, taking in the opulence. Your Majesty, he said, bowing slightly. I think we can dispense with formalities, don't you? Leora turned, and the moonlight silhouetted her slender form through the thin fabric of her gown. After all, this isn't exactly a formal royal audience. Jack smiled. As you wish, Leora. She gestured for him to join her on the balcony. Wine? It's from Earth, actually. A gift from your ambassador. You've developed a taste for human things, he asked, accepting the glass she offered. Some of them. Her eyes met his with unmistakable intent. They stood side by side, looking out at the capital city sprawled below them. Oh, a gleaming metropolis of towering spires and arching bridges. Beautiful, isn't it? She said. Very. Though I admit I haven't seen much of it. Service staff rarely leave the palace grounds. Leora frowned. That seems restrictive. It's for our protection, supposedly. Humans are still novelties here. Some of your people are curious, others less welcoming. And yet you came here willingly. Jack took a long sip of wine before answering. Earth is crowded. Opportunities are limited unless you're exceptionally wealthy or connected. When the Nexus Prime Embassy offered contracts for service workers, it seemed like an adventure. Is that all you were seeking? Adventure? Leora moved closer, her arm brushing against his. Maybe I was running from something too, he admitted. What could make a man with your abilities choose to hide as a janitor? Jack tensed slightly. What makes you think I'm hiding? No one moves like you did today without training. No one analyzes complex systems that quickly without education. She placed her hand on his forearm, feeling the taut muscle beneath. Who are you really, Jack Harper? Their faces were inches apart now. The air between them seemed charged with electricity. "Tonight," he said softly, "I'm just a man who received an invitation from a beautiful woman." Leora's lips parted slightly. "Is that how you see me? As a woman, not a queen?" "The crown is what you wear," Jack replied, reaching up to gently touch a strand of her silvery hair. "But it's not who you are." Something in his words broke through a barrier Leora hadn't even realized existed. As royalty, she was accustomed to being treated as a symbol, a position, never simply as herself. "And who am I, then?" she whispered. "I'm hoping to find out." Their lips met in a kiss that started tentatively but quickly deepened with unexpected hunger. Leora had kissed courtiers before, but never had she felt this strange, consuming heat that seemed to spread from her core outward. Jack's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she marveled at how perfectly they fit together despite their different physiologies. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "Your people don't usually..." "With humans," Jack started. "My people don't usually do a lot of things I'm considering right now," Leora replied with a boldness that surprised even herself. She took his hand and led him inside and toward her bedchamber. As the door closed behind them, the last thing visible was their silhouettes merging into one. In the security center, the monitors showing the royal chambers suddenly went dark. "What happened?" Drevix demanded. "The privacy protocols activated, sir," the officer explained. "They can't be overridden without the royal seal." Drevix slammed his fist against the console. "I want everything we have on this human. Service records, background checks, entry documentation, everything. And I want guards stationed discreetly near the royal chambers." "Sir, if the Queen discovers..." "She won't," Drevix cut him off. "But I will discover what game this human is playing. No one gets this close to our Queen without a motive." Hours later, Leora lay with her head on Jack's chest, listening to the strange rhythm of his human heart, faster than her own. Their bodies, so different yet complementary, had found a harmony she never imagined possible. "You're full of surprises," she murmured, tracing patterns on his skin. Jack smiled in the darkness. "So I've been told." The first light of Nexus Prime's sun filtered through the diaphanous curtains of the royal bedchamber, casting a warm glow across the tangled sheets. Leora woke first, momentarily startled by the unfamiliar warmth beside her. Jack slept peacefully, his chest rising and falling with each breath, his face relaxed in a way she hadn't seen before. She studied him with fascination. Human skin, so different from her own blue complexion, was a marvel of contradictions. Soft yet resilient, warm to the touch, and marked with small imperfections that somehow added to its appeal rather than detracted from it. She traced a finger along a faint scar on his shoulder, wondering about its story. The night had been a revelation. Their physiological differences had created moments of awkward humor and surprising pleasure. Where her people were naturally cool-skinned and deliberate in their movements, Jack radiated heat and possessed an intensity that left her breathless. The memory brought a flush to her cheeks. As if sensing her thoughts, Jack's eyes opened. For a moment he seemed disoriented, then his gaze focused on her and he smiled. "Good morning, Your Majesty," he murmured. "I thought we dispensed with formalities last night," she replied, returning his smile. "That was last night." He propped himself up on one elbow. "In the light of day, I'm trying to remember my place. And where exactly is that place now?" Leora asked, her tone light but her question serious. Before he could answer, a chime sounded, the discreet signal that her attendants were waiting to begin her morning preparations. "Reality calls," she sighed, reluctantly slipping from the bed and donning a robe. "You should go. Use the service corridor behind the tapestry. It leads to the staff quarters." Jack nodded, gathering his clothes. "Will I see you again?" "Like this, I mean." Leora paused at the door to her dressing room. "I would like that very much." After he departed, Leora allowed her attendants to prepare her for the day's duties. As they arranged her hair and adjusted her formal attire, her mind kept returning to the night before. She had taken lovers before, discreetly as was expected of royalty, but none had affected her like this human. "Your Majesty seems distracted this morning," observed Alara, her chief attendant. "Do I?" Leora replied non-committally. "You're smiling more than usual," Alara noted. a knowing glint in her eye. "It suits you." Meanwhile, Jack made his way back to the service quarters, careful to avoid the main corridors. He nearly reached his destination when a firm hand clamped onto his shoulder. "Harper," came the stern voice of General Dravix. "A word." Jack turned, his expression carefully neutral. "General, good morning." Dravix gestured to a nearby alcove. Once they were relatively private, he spoke in a low, threatening tone. "I don't know what game you're playing, human, but it ends now." "I'm not playing any game, sir." "No?" Dravix produced a data tablet. "Jack Harper arrived on Nexus Prime 8 months ago. Service worker classification. Before that, nothing. No records of military service, no specialized education, nothing to explain your performance yesterday." Jack maintained his composure. "I've had an interesting life." "I'm sure you have," Dravix sneered. "Stay away from the Queen. Whatever you're after, political asylum, wealth, influence, you won't get it." "With respect, General, I don't think that's your decision to make." Dravix's eyes narrowed. "The Queen is young, inexperienced, easily impressed by novelties, like humans who can perform unexpected tricks. My duty is to protect her, even from her own poor judgment." "Is that what you think this is? Poor judgment?" "I think," Dravix said, leaning closer, "that you are not what you appear to be, and I will discover the truth." With that, he strode away, leaving Jack to contemplate this new complication. By midday, whispers had spread throughout the palace. The Queen had shown special interest in a human servant. The human had nearly completed the royal test. The Queen's chambers had been occupied until dawn. When Leora entered the grand reception hall for the afternoon's diplomatic meetings, she immediately sensed the undercurrent of gossip. Courtiers watched her with heightened curiosity, conversations pausing as she passed. High Counselor Thrain approached, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, a moment of your time?" She followed him to a private antechamber. "There is talk," he began delicately. "There is always talk," she replied dismissively. "This concerns your association with the human janitor." Leora's eyes flashed. "My personal affairs are not the business of the court." "With respect, Your Majesty, everything you do is the business of the court, particularly when it involves a human of questionable background." "Questionable? In what way?" Thrain hesitated. "General Dravix has raised concerns about inconsistencies in the human's history, and there is another matter." "Yes?" "Prince Navar of the Thalassian Confederation has arrived unexpectedly. He requests an audience." Leora stiffened. Prince Navar had been pursuing a political alliance through marriage for over a year. His timing was suspiciously convenient. How did he learn of yesterday's events so quickly? News travels fast, especially news that might affect interplanetary relations. The implication was clear. Her dalliance with a human servant could jeopardize important alliances. "Show him in," she said finally. "Let's hear what the prince has to say." Moments later, Prince Navar entered, tall, imposing, with the characteristic purple-tinged skin and ridge-marked forehead of the Thalassian race. His formal attire gleamed with precious metals and ceremonial weapons. "Queen Leora," he greeted her, performing the elaborate Thalassian bow. "You are as radiant as ever." "Prince Navar, your visit is unexpected." "The best pleasures often are," he replied smoothly. "I was in the sector when I heard about your entertaining day of trials yesterday. A human servant attempting the royal test? I had to see for myself what sort of human could capture your attention so completely." His tone was light, but his eyes were cold and calculating. "The trials are open to any I deem worthy," Leora stated firmly. "Of course," Navar smiled thinly, "though traditionally they determine who might be worthy of standing beside the throne, do they not? Surely you aren't considering a human for such a position." Before Leora could respond, a palace guard entered hurriedly. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. General Dravix requests your immediate presence in the security center. There's been an incident involving the human, Jack Harper." Leora strode into the security center, her royal regalia flowing behind her like liquid silver. The room fell silent as she entered, technicians and guards bowing hastily. General Dravix stood at the central console, his posture rigid with barely contained satisfaction. "What is this about, General?" she demanded. "Your Majesty," Drevix bowed perfunctorily, "we've uncovered disturbing evidence regarding your human acquaintance." Jack stood in the center of the room, flanked by 2 guards. His expression was calm, but Leora could see tension in the set of his shoulders. "What evidence?" she asked, careful to keep her tone neutral despite the anger building within her. Drevix gestured to the display screen. "Security footage from the Royal Archives, taken 3 days ago." The screen showed Jack, clearly recognizable despite his maintenance uniform, accessing a secure terminal in a section of the archives restricted to high-level officials. "Explain yourself," Leora said, addressing Jack directly. "I was cleaning the archives as assigned," he replied evenly. "The terminal was active when I arrived." "And you just happened to start typing?" Drevix sneered. "I logged out of the active session. Standard procedure when finding an unattended terminal." "Then why," Drevix pressed, "does the system log show a search query for the royal test specifications?" A murmur ran through the room. Leora's eyes narrowed. "Is this true?" Before Jack could answer, the door slid open again. Prince Navarre entered, followed by High Counselor Thrain. "Forgive the intrusion," Navarre said smoothly, "but I heard there was some trouble with the human. I thought I might offer the assistance of Thalassian intelligence." "This is an internal matter," Leora stated firmly. "Is it?" Navarre circled Jack like a predator. "A human servant accessing restricted information, then miraculously performing well in the royal test? It suggests espionage, possibly even sabotage." "I didn't cheat," Jack said, addressing Leora directly. "The footage is real, but it's been edited. I logged out of the terminal. Nothing more." "He lies," Drevix insisted. "The system logs don't lie." "System logs can be altered," Jack countered, "especially by someone with high-level access." The implication hung in the air. Drevix's face darkened with fury. "You dare accuse me of fabricating evidence?" "I'm simply stating facts," Jack replied calmly. "I have no reason to access information about the royal test. I had no expectation of participating in it." "Until the Queen selected you," Navarre interjected. "How convenient that she chose you, the one human who had supposedly studied the test parameters." Leora raised a hand, silencing the room. "These accusations require investigation. Until then." "Until then," Navarre interrupted, "perhaps a more direct approach would settle matters." He turned to face Jack fully. "I challenge you, human, to the Thalassian trial of honor." The room erupted in shocked whispers. The Thalassian trial was notorious throughout the galaxy, a brutal combat ritual that few survived, even among the warrior races. "Prince Navarre," Thrain began cautiously, "the human is not familiar with your customs. He cannot be expected to—" "I accept," Jack said quietly. Leora's head snapped toward him. "You cannot! As Queen, I forbid it." "With respect, Your Majesty," Navarre said with a thin smile, "the challenge has been issued and accepted. By the interplanetary treaty your predecessor signed, you cannot interfere. Unless, of course, you wish to declare the human your formal consort, which would create its own diplomatic complications." Leora felt trapped. To declare Jack her consort would be politically disastrous given his status and the current suspicions. To allow the challenge would likely mean his death. "The trial will take place tomorrow at midday," Navarre announced, "in the central arena, where all may witness." As the prince departed, followed by a triumphant-looking Drevix, Leora ordered the room cleared except for Jack and herself. When they were alone, she turned on him. "What were you thinking? The Thalassian trial is a death sentence for most of their own kind, let alone a human." "I had no choice," Jack replied. "Refusing would be seen as an admission of guilt. And accepting is suicide." She paced the room, her frustration evident. "You don't understand what you're facing." "I understand more than you think." Something in his tone made her stop and look at him closely. "What aren't you telling me?" Jack hesitated, then sighed. "The footage isn't entirely fabricated. I did access that terminal, but not to study the test." "Then why?" "I needed to send a message, a secure message that wouldn't be intercepted by certain parties." Leora's eyes widened. "You're not just a janitor," No, he admitted. I'm not. Then who are you? A spy? An assassin? Nothing so dramatic. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'm part of a human diplomatic initiative. Unofficial, deniable. We call it soft contact. We integrate into societies that might be resistant to formal human diplomatic presence, build relationships, demonstrate human value. You're a spy, she repeated flatly. I prefer cultural ambassador. A hint of his usual humor flashed in his eyes. My job was to observe, report back on cultural nuances, help prepare for eventual formal diplomatic relations. Nothing sinister. And last night? Was that part of your cultural ambassador duties too? The question hung between them, charged with hurt and uncertainty. No, Jack said softly. That was just me. A man completely captivated by an extraordinary woman. Despite her anger, Leora felt her resolve weakening. There was a sincerity in his eyes that was hard to dismiss. I need time to think, she said finally, and you need to prepare. The Thalassian trial is tomorrow. Any tips? He asked, attempting to lighten the mood. Yes, don't die. She turned to leave, then paused. And Jack? Whatever happens in that arena, I'll be watching. With that, she departed, leaving Jack alone with the weight of tomorrow's challenge pressing down upon him. The central arena of Nexus Prime was an architectural marvel, a perfect circle of gleaming metal and transparent force fields that could seat 30,000 spectators. Today, it was filled to capacity. News of a human facing the Thalassian trial had spread like wildfire through the capital. Jack stood in the preparation chamber, dressed in the traditional combatant's attire, a lightweight bodysuit designed to offer minimal protection while allowing maximum mobility. On a Thalassian or a Nexus Prime native, it would have looked imposing. On his human frame, it seemed almost comically inadequate. The odds in the betting pools are not in your favor, remarked Krell, the warrior who had failed the royal test the day Jack was chosen. He had unexpectedly volunteered to serve as Jack's second, a ceremonial position required by Thalassian tradition. I'm shocked, Jack replied dryly, stretching his shoulders. Prince Navar has never lost a trial of honor. He has killed 16 challengers. You're really boosting my confidence here, Krell. The warrior tilted his head, studying Jack. Why did you accept? You must know it's suicide. Jack paused in his preparations. Because sometimes you have to stand your ground, even when the odds are impossible. Humans understand that better than most. A noble sentiment for a tombstone. Krell handed him a ceremonial blade, beautiful but clearly decorative rather than functional. This is traditional. You won't actually fight with it. What will I fight with? Nothing. The Thalassian provides the weapons. It's their way of ensuring an advantage. Jack nodded grimly. Of course it is. A chime sounded, signaling it was time. As they walked toward the arena entrance, Krell spoke again. The Queen was watching you yesterday during the royal test. I've never seen her look at anyone that way. And how was that? Like you were a puzzle she desperately wanted to solve. Krell paused. Many would die for such attention from her. I'm hoping to avoid that particular outcome today, Jack replied. The massive doors slid open, revealing the arena floor, a circular expanse of polished stone surrounded by towering walls and force fields. The crowd's roar was deafening. Jack stepped forward into the harsh light, squinting as his eyes adjusted. Across the arena stood Prince Navar, resplendent in ceremonial armor that accentuated his imposing physique. The Thalassian's purple skin gleamed with ritual oils, and the ridges on his forehead seemed more pronounced in the bright light. Jack's gaze drifted upward to the royal box. Leora sat on a ceremonial throne, her expression carefully neutral, though he thought he detected concern in her azure eyes. Beside her, General Dravix looked smugly satisfied, while High Counselor Thrain appeared troubled. A booming voice announced the terms of the trial: 3 rounds of combat, each with different weapons chosen by the challenger, Prince Navar. Victory came by submission or incapacitation. Death, while not required, was not prohibited. Navar approached the center of the arena, where a ceremonial platform held an array of weapons. For the first round, he announced, his voice amplified for all to hear, we shall use the shock staffs. An attendant brought forward 2 long metal rods, each crackling with energy at both ends. Navarre took one, testing its weight with practiced ease. Jack accepted the other, nearly dropping it when a surge of energy pulsed through his hands. The weapon was heavier than it looked and clearly designed for someone with greater strength and reach. Begin, called the officiator. Navarre wasted no time, lunging forward with surprising speed for his size. Jack barely managed to raise his staff to block the first strike. The impact sent vibrations through his arms, nearly numbing them. The Thalassian pressed his advantage, raining down blows that forced Jack into a defensive retreat. Each block drained more of his strength, and several glancing hits sent painful shocks through his system. The crowd roared its approval as Navarre drove Jack to the edge of the arena. One more step back, and he would hit the force field, a painful experience that would leave him vulnerable. In the royal box, Leora gripped the arms of her throne so tightly her knuckles paled to a lighter blue. He can't win like this, she murmured. That was the point, Your Majesty, Dravix replied quietly. The human's humiliation will end this distraction. Down in the arena, Jack found himself cornered. Navarre swung his staff in a powerful arc aimed at Jack's head, a blow that would end the round, if not the entire match. But instead of blocking or dodging, Jack did something unexpected. He dropped to the ground, letting the staff pass over him, and rolled forward between Navarre's legs. The move was so unorthodox, so undignified by Thalassian combat standards, that it caught the prince completely off guard. As Jack came up behind him, he swung his staff low, connecting with the back of Navarre's knees. The shock discharge combined with the physical impact sent the prince staggering forward. The crowd fell silent in shock. Jack pressed his momentary advantage, delivering a series of quick strikes that forced Navarre to defend rather than attack. What he lacked in strength, he made up for in speed and unpredictability. Human fighting has no honor? Navarre snarled as he regained his footing. Funny, Jack replied, circling warily. I thought winning was the point. Enraged, Navarre charged again, but this time Jack was ready. He sidestepped at the last moment and used the prince's momentum against him, sending him crashing into the force field he had tried to back Jack into. The crowd gasped as Navarre convulsed from the field's discharge before collapsing to one knee. Round 1 to the human challenger, the officiator announced, sounding as surprised as everyone else. In the royal box, Leora couldn't suppress a smile. Beside her, Dravix's expression darkened further. Interesting technique, Thrain observed. Unorthodox, but effective. It's how humans have always survived against her superior forces, Leora replied. Adaptation, creativity, using an opponent's strength against them. As Jack returned to his side of the arena, he caught Leora's eye. The smallest nod of approval from her sent a surge of renewed determination through him. Navarre rose, his pride clearly wounded more than his body. The first round was instructive, he announced. For the second round, we shall use the gravity gauntlets. The attendants brought forward 2 sets of metal gloves that hummed with energy. Jack eyed them warily as Navarre donned his pair with practiced ease. These should be entertaining, the prince said with a cruel smile, especially for someone unaccustomed to manipulating gravitational fields. As Jack slipped on the heavy gauntlets, he realized the second round would be even more challenging than the first. But he had survived one round against impossible odds. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity's reputation for defying the impossible wasn't exaggerated after all. The gravity gauntlets hummed with power as Jack flexed his fingers, trying to get a feel for the unfamiliar technology. Across the arena, Prince Navarre smirked, clearly confident in his advantage. These weapons, the officiator explained, allow the wielder to manipulate localized gravitational fields. They can be used to increase or decrease the weight of objects or opponents. Jack had seen such technology before, but had never operated it. Earth's scientists were still years away from perfecting similar devices. Begin, the officiator called. Navarre wasted no time. He thrust his hand forward and suddenly Jack felt as if an invisible mountain had been placed on his shoulders. His knees buckled under the crushing pressure as his body weight seemingly quintupled. Not so agile now, are you, human? Navarre taunted, circling his struggling opponent. In the royal box, Leora leaned forward anxiously. He's going to crush him. But while she watched the arena, her chief attendant, Ilara, slipped a data crystal into her hand. "Your Majesty," she whispered, "you need to see this." Immediately, Lyra glanced down at the small crystal, then back at the arena where Jack was still pinned by artificial gravity. This had better be important. She discreetly inserted the crystal into her personal data pad. What she saw made her azure eyes widen in shock. Security footage showing General Dravix and Prince Navarre in a private meeting the night before Jack accessed the terminal. The audio was crystal clear. "The human is getting too close to the Queen," Dravix was saying. "We need to discredit him." "Plant false evidence," Navarre suggested. "Something that will make him look like a spy or saboteur." "I'll arrange for him to be caught accessing restricted information," Dravix agreed. "Then you can challenge him to your trial. The problem solves itself." Leora's hand tightened around the datapad. She glanced at Dravix, who was watching the arena with barely concealed satisfaction, unaware that his conspiracy had been exposed. Down in the arena, Jack struggled against the crushing gravity. Each movement required enormous effort, sweat pouring down his face as he fought to remain upright. "Human physiology is so fragile," Navarre commented, increasing the pressure further. "I could break every bone in your body with a gesture." But Jack wasn't giving up. Gritting his teeth, he forced his right arm upward, the one wearing the gravity gauntlet. If Navarre could manipulate gravity, so could he. The question was how. The gauntlets responded to neural impulses, but the interface was designed for Thalassian physiology. Jack concentrated, trying different mental commands until he felt a slight vibration in response. Just as Navarre moved in to deliver what would likely be a finishing blow, Jack managed to activate his own gauntlet. Rather than targeting Navarre directly, he aimed at the ground beneath the prince's feet. Suddenly, the stone floor beneath Navarre became as insubstantial as foam. The prince's foot sank into it, throwing him off balance. In his surprise, his concentration broke, and the crushing gravity pinning Jack eased momentarily. It was all the opening Jack needed. He lunged forward, using his gauntlet to create a pocket of reduced gravity around himself. The sensation was dizzying, like moving underwater, but it allowed him to move with unexpected speed. Navarre tried to re-establish his gravitational hold, but Jack was now too close. He delivered a solid punch to the prince's midsection, enhanced by a localized gravity field that multiplied its impact. The Thalassian doubled over, gasping for breath. The crowd erupted in astonished cheers. "Impossible?" Dravix muttered in the royal box. "No human could master those gauntlets so quickly." Lyra rose from her throne. "This ends now," she declared, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of a monarch. "Stop the trial." The officiator hesitated, looking between the queen and the combatants. "By Thalassian law, the trial cannot be interrupted unless," Dravix began. "Unless there is evidence of conspiracy or sabotage," Lyra finished for him. She held up her datapad, projecting its contents onto the large display screen surrounding the arena. "Evidence like this." The crowd gasped as the recorded conversation between Dravix and Navarre played for all to hear. The prince, still recovering from Jack's blow, looked up in horror as his plot was exposed. "General Dravix," Lyra's voice rang out, "you are relieved of your duties pending a full investigation. Guards, detain him." As royal guards moved to surround the stunned general, Lyra descended from the royal box to the arena floor, her silver regalia gleaming in the harsh light. "Prince Navarre," she addressed the Thalassian, who had now risen to his feet, "your actions constitute a diplomatic incident. The Thalassian Confederation will be formally notified of your attempt to manipulate Nexus Prime's internal affairs." Navarre's purple skin darkened with rage. "You would take the word of a human over mine? Over your own generals?" "I take the word of evidence," Lyra replied coolly, "and my own judgment." She turned to Jack, who had removed the gravity gauntlets and stood watching the scene unfold with cautious relief. "Are you injured?" "Nothing serious," he assured her, though his body ached from the gravitational assault. Lyra faced the crowd, her voice amplified for all to hear. "The Thalassian trial is concluded due to interference and conspiracy, or as queen, I declare it null and void." A murmur ran through the spectators. Such an outcome was unprecedented. Furthermore, she continued, I declare that Jack Harper has demonstrated exceptional ability, courage, and honor, qualities that reflect the best of humanity and qualities that Nexus Prime would do well to recognize. She extended her hand to Jack, who took it with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. The touch of her cool blue skin against his sent a familiar thrill through him, despite the public setting. The human cheated, Navarre shouted, desperation in his voice. He must have had prior knowledge of our weapons. Actually, Jack replied calmly, humans have been experimenting with gravity manipulation for decades. We're just not as advanced as you, but we're quick learners. Leora smiled at this typical human understatement. The court will reconvene tomorrow morning, she announced. Until then, Prince Navarre will remain under palace supervision, and Jack Harper will be my personal guest. As they left the arena together, followed by royal guards, the crowd erupted in excited chatter. Never in the history of Nexus Prime had such a dramatic turn of events occurred. A human janitor defeating a Thalassian prince, a royal conspiracy exposed, and the queen herself intervening. You took quite a risk, Leora said quietly as they walked through the private royal corridor. Those gauntlets could have killed you. Worth it, Jack replied simply. Though I wouldn't have minded knowing about your evidence a bit sooner. Alara only discovered it minutes ago. She's been suspicious of Dravix for some time. When they reached the privacy of the royal chambers, Leora finally allowed her composed facade to crack. She turned to Jack, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief, admiration, and something deeper. I thought I was going to watch you die today, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack stepped closer, drawn by the vulnerability she rarely displayed. It would take more than a pompous prince and some fancy tech to get rid of me? So I'm learning, her lips curved into a smile. Humans are remarkably resilient. We have our moments, he agreed, closing the remaining distance between them. As their lips met in a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't, both knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. The political fallout from today's events would be significant. Questions about Jack's true role would need answers. The future of relations between humans and the people of Nexus Prime hung in the balance. But for now, in this moment, none of that mattered. The Grand Council chamber of Nexus Prime buzzed with anticipation. Representatives from every province of the planet filled the tiered seating, their conversations creating a symphony of different dialects and tones. At the center of it all stood a raised platform where Queen Leora would soon address her people. 1 week had passed since the dramatic events at the arena. General Dravix had been formally charged with conspiracy and abuse of power. Prince Navarre had been escorted back to Thalassian space with a diplomatic warning, his pride more wounded than his body. And Jack Harper, the human janitor who had defied all expectations, had finally revealed his complete story to Leora. You're really an advanced diplomat, she had asked that night, as they lay tangled in the sheets of her bed, their bodies still humming from their passionate reunion. Cultural attaché is the official title, he'd explained, tracing patterns on her blue skin. Earth has been trying to establish formal relations with Nexus Prime for years, but your previous administration was resistant to the idea. So they sent you undercover? As a janitor, it was the perfect cover. No one notices the cleaning staff. I could observe, learn your customs, report back on the best approach for formal diplomatic contact. He'd smiled ruefully. I wasn't supposed to catch the Queen's attention or almost complete the royal test. And definitely not supposed to end up in her bed, Leora had teased, her azure eyes gleaming with mischief. That was definitely not in my mission parameters, he'd agreed, pulling her closer. But I can't say I regret the deviation. Now, as the chamber doors opened and Queen Leora entered in her full ceremonial regalia, Jack stood to one side of the platform. He wore a formal Earth diplomatic uniform, navy blue with silver accents, that had been delivered by special courier once his true identity had been communicated to his superiors. Leora took her place at the center of the platform, her silver hair elaborately styled, her blue skin complemented by the shimmering fabric of her royal attire. The chamber fell silent. People of Nexus Prime, she began, her melodious voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. Today marks a historic moment in our planet's history. For too long, we have viewed the galaxy through a lens of isolation and suspicion. Recent events have shown us the danger of such thinking. She gestured toward Jack. This man came to our world not as a conqueror or a threat, but as an observer, someone seeking to understand our ways so that our peoples might find common ground. And what did we do? We treated him as a servant, overlooked his abilities, and when he demonstrated his worth, certain elements conspired to destroy him. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many had witnessed the Thalassian trial and the subsequent revelations. Yet through all this, he showed us qualities we claim to value: courage, adaptability, honor, and grace under pressure. In short, he showed us humanity at its finest. Jack felt a flush of pride at her words, not just for himself, but for his species. This was why he had accepted the undercover assignment, to build bridges between worlds. Therefore, Leora continued, I am pleased to announce that Nexus Prime will formally open diplomatic relations with Earth. Ambassador Harper will serve as Earth's first official representative to our world. The announcement was met with a mixture of applause and surprised exclamations. Jack stepped forward as Leora beckoned him. Furthermore, she added, to symbolize the special relationship between our worlds, I am creating a new position within the Royal Court, Special Advisor on Interspecies Relations, which Ambassador Harper has agreed to fill concurrently with his diplomatic duties. This was the compromise they had reached after nights of discussion. Jack would serve openly as Earth's ambassador, fulfilling his mission, while his position as special advisor would allow him to remain close to Leora without violating protocol or raising too many eyebrows. Thank you, Your Majesty, Jack said formally, bowing to Leora before addressing the assembly. People of Nexus Prime, I stand before you not just as a representative of Earth, but as someone who has come to deeply admire your world and its people. He paused, his eyes meeting Leora's briefly. Humans have a saying, sometimes the greatest discoveries happen by accident. When I came here as a simple observer, I never imagined I would find myself standing before you like this. But life, like the royal test, often presents us with unexpected challenges and opportunities. The measure of any species is how we respond to those moments. The chamber was silent now, all attention focused on this human who spoke with such conviction. Earth and Nexus Prime have much to offer each other. Different perspectives, different strengths, different ways of solving problems. Together we can achieve far more than either world could alone. As the assembly broke into genuine applause, Leora stepped forward again. The formal signing of our diplomatic accord will take place tomorrow. For now, this council is adjourned. As the representatives filed out, discussing this unexpected development, Leora and Jack remained on the platform. Ambassador Harper, she said with a hint of teasing in her voice, it has a certain ring to it. Better than that human janitor, I suppose, he replied with a smile. I don't know. I was rather fond of that janitor. He had talented hands. I assure you, Your Majesty, the ambassador possesses all the same skills. Their banter was interrupted by High Counselor Thrain, who approached with a group of provincial governors eager to meet the new ambassador. Hours later, after the last of the dignitaries had departed, Leora and Jack finally found themselves alone in her private chambers. So, she said, removing her ceremonial headdress with relief, was this how you imagined your mission would end? Jack loosened the collar of his formal uniform. Not even close. My superiors are still in shock. They expected a preliminary report, not a full diplomatic breakthrough, and an ambassador who's also the Queen's. What exactly am I to you, officially? Special advisor, she replied primly, before her formal demeanor melted into a more intimate smile. Unofficially, that's still evolving. He moved closer, drawn to her as he had been since that first day when she'd pinched his shoulder and challenged him to attempt the impossible. I like the sound of evolving, he murmured, taking her hands in his. It suggests a future with many possibilities. Indeed it does, Leora agreed, leaning into him. Though I must warn you, relationships between humans and Nexus Prime royalty are unprecedented. There will be challenges. I've noticed that humans tend to excel at unprecedented challenges, Jack replied, his lips finding hers in a kiss that promised much more. It's kind of our specialty. As they lost themselves in each other, both knew that the path ahead would not be simple. Cultural differences, political complications, biological considerations, all would need to be navigated. But in this moment, those concerns seemed distant and manageable. After all, if a human janitor could pass the royal test, survive a Thalassian trial, and help forge a historic alliance between worlds, what couldn't they accomplish together?